On February 20th, 2025, the U.S. government branded 8 Mexican drug cartels as foreign terrorist organizations, a sanction once reserved for ISIS or Al-Qaeda. Just months later, leaked documents revealed Pentagon war plans and U.S. warships gathering off Latin America's coast, while Mexico's new president issued a defiant warning: no intervention, ever. America's war on cartels is about to get a lot bigger. But does unleashing military force finally promise security, or risk igniting a cross-border conflict spiraling beyond control? The answers could decide the fate of a continent and change everything you think you know about the drug war. On January 20th, 2025, President Trump signed Executive Order 14157, redefining the legal landscape for America's battle with transnational crime. The order authorized the Secretary of State to label cartels as foreign terrorist organizations, a move that, until now, had been reserved for groups like ISIS and Al-Qaeda. By February 20th, 8 organizations, including the Sinaloa cartel, CJNG, Tren de Aragua, MS-13, and the Gulf Cartel, were formally designated both as foreign terrorist organizations and specially designated global terrorists. This new status instantly criminalized any material support, from cash transfers to logistical help, and triggered sweeping sanctions through the Treasury's Office of Foreign Assets Control. Banks, logistics firms, and even local suppliers found themselves exposed to prosecution if they interacted with cartel-linked entities. The legal language, published in the Federal Register, made clear that this was no longer just a matter for law enforcement. A pen stroke had shifted the drug war onto a new footing, one where counterterrorism authorities, not just narcotics agents, would now drive the campaign. On August 8th, a classified Pentagon planning order surfaced, revealing that President Trump had quietly directed the military to prepare strike options against cartel targets. The leak sent shockwaves through diplomatic circles. By midday, President Claudia Sheinbaum addressed reporters in Mexico City, stating, "Mexico is a free, independent, and sovereign country. No foreign government will violate our territory." Her message left no room for negotiation. U.S. officials, pressed for details, declined to comment on operational specifics, but confirmed that the Pentagon was developing scenarios for direct action. The timing of the leak raised suspicions in Mexico's cabinet, with senior advisors warning that any cross-border incursion would be treated as an act of aggression. Behind closed doors, Sheinbaum's team began consulting constitutional lawyers and military commanders, preparing for scenarios that only weeks earlier had seemed unthinkable. The diplomatic rift widened, with both governments now operating under the shadow of a possible military confrontation. 7 U.S. warships and a nuclear submarine now form a line in the southern Caribbean, their hulls bristling with the latest in surveillance and strike technology. Official statements frame the mission as a crackdown on cartel trafficking routes, but the military posture sends a message that reaches far beyond organized crime. Mexico, now the United States' largest trading partner, moved $840 billion in goods across the border last year, more than any other country. Supply chains that stretch from Monterrey to Michigan depend on the smooth flow of auto parts, electronics, and raw materials, with trucks and rail cars crossing the border over 1 million times each month. The presence of warships so close to these commercial arteries has not gone unnoticed in boardrooms or on trading floors. Business leaders warn that even rumors of conflict could rattle markets, jeopardize contracts, and drive up costs for manufacturers on both sides. As the fleet patrols near vital shipping lanes, the risk is clear. A single miscalculation could freeze trade, disrupt supply networks, and send shockwaves through an $840 billion economic lifeline. The machinery of war now stands watch over the machinery of commerce, and neither side can afford a first shot. In August 2025, Ismael Mayo Zambada, co-founder of the Sinaloa cartel, stood before a U.S. federal judge, and pleaded guilty to leading a criminal enterprise that spanned nearly 4 decades. At 75, Zambada accepted a mandatory life sentence and agreed to forfeit $15 billion, more than any cartel figure before him. In open court, he described a system where bribes flowed to police, military commanders, and politicians, allowing the cartel to operate with near total impunity. Court documents detailed how these payments reached every level of government, making prosecution in Mexico nearly impossible. Zambada's admission lifted the veil on the mechanics of corruption, revealing how the cartel's power was built as much on institutional decay as on violence. The forfeiture order, $1 billion larger than El Chapo's, signaled that U.S. courts could reach cartel fortunes even when Mexican justice faltered. For Washington, the case became proof that legal institutions, patient, methodical, and relentless, could succeed where force alone had failed. Zambada's story now stands as a warning. In the end, even the most powerful cartel boss can be brought down not by bullets, but by the slow grind of the law. In Jalisco, searchers uncovered the remains of dozens at a ranch that cartel gunmen had turned into a training ground and killing site. The names of the missing fill entire registries, over 131,000 people, are now listed as disappeared in Mexico, with nearly half of all cases reported since 2019. Mothers and wives sift through fields and riverbeds, searching for fragments of clothing or bone. Meanwhile, the Centers for Disease Control reports a 26.9% drop in U.S. overdose deaths over the past year, the steepest decline since the opioid crisis began. The contrast is stark. As overdose numbers fall north of the border, the toll of disappearances continues to climb in the south, leaving families with only silence and unanswered questions. Mexico's constitution draws a hard line. Article 89 forbids any foreign military action on its soil, even against criminal groups. In the United Nations, Mexico has filed formal objections to doctrines that justify unilateral strikes, arguing they undermine international order. Yet enforcement gaps persist. Mexico's World Justice Project score remains among the lowest in the region, reflecting chronic impunity. Meanwhile, the supply chain that feeds cartel labs runs far beyond any border. Chemical precursors flow from Chinese factories to Mexican ports, then on to clandestine labs, with each link shielded by layers of corruption and weak oversight. No airstrike or raid can sever these global pipelines. The legal firewall stands, but the machinery of trafficking adapts, exploiting every gap in enforcement and every loophole in regulation. In August 2025, as 7 U.S. warships assembled in the Caribbean, Mexico's government stood firm against military intervention, citing Article 89 of its constitution. This year alone, the U.S. designated 8 cartels as foreign terrorist organizations and froze billions in assets, yet the cartels adapted and violence persisted. Court documents revealed the downfall of El Mayo Zambada, with a $15 billion forfeiture, showing courts can deliver blows that armies cannot. Despite a 26.9% drop in U.S. overdose deaths in 2024, tens of thousands remain disappeared in Mexico, and the trafficking chain from China to Latin America remains intact. Key Pentagon directives and intelligence assessments are still classified, leaving the full scope of planned operations unknown. Today, sanctions and legal cooperation continue, while the threat of escalation tests U.S.-Latin American alliances. The evidence is clear. Force alone cannot dismantle networks built on profit and impunity. To change outcomes, governments must strengthen institutions and address the root incentives that fuel the trade.